The most underrated voice in all media. The alternative's alternative. Chuck Ochelli.
There we go. Well, we might have had a bit of an overlap, but it is indeed the 14th day of June 2017, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar. And this is, factually speaking, the Ochelli Effect, broadcast live from the facilities of Ochelli.com, but also tonight being heard on a couple of other places that we'll mention tonight. Haggy Shack, Radio TCT, which is they're changing times, I believe, radio, and Shake and Wake is actually carrying the broadcast tonight, so we are in good shape. Now, hopefully you guys are all happy. Maybe you found us on TuneIn. Not too many people have yet, but we shall see what happens. Either way, if you're encountering it later on down the stream through the podcast, et cetera, we do appreciate you utilizing your applicable applications and your fondle slabs of choice in order to tune in. Now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, it is Wednesday night, and normally what we do is have Mark Windows on in the first hour, and in the second hour, Sunshine On has been a pretty interesting addition to the show, and I'm really happy. This week, Sunshine and I are going to talk to a guy named Bob. And I guarantee you he's going to give you a great deal more explanation about who he is and what he's all about during that second hour. But before we get there, let's talk about Mark Windows, windowsontheworld.net. I'll tell you something. It's a pretty cool looking site. I was checking out some of the video. Mark, you know, I'm an audio guy because I have a face for radio, but Mark's a pretty good looking guy. You can imagine he might be related to Johnny Rotten directly if you look at him. I love that look. He's got that kind of thing going on, but at the same time, you have to take him seriously because there is something different going on there. You know, Johnny Rotten, John Lydon, whatever you want to call him, had that sort of dazed look on occasion and definitely had attitude issues publicly that you could observe. Mark, on the other hand, tells you right off the top after you watch his really cool intro, he tells you right off the top, look, we're not here to discuss conspiracy theories. We're here to discuss real information. And although I do run him through the ringer here on Wednesday nights sometimes, he definitely puts out a lot of good information. And I'm so glad you're with me tonight, Mark. Again, windowsontheworld.net. Yes, it does sound like that restaurant that used to be at the top of a tall building somewhere, but it's not. It's Mark's website, and it's loaded with lots of good information, and some of which we're going to get into tonight as we continue the series, actually, that was sort of interrupted last week. But, hey, things happen when you're doing this live. Mark, how you doing tonight?
Hi, Chuck. That was a great introduction, as usual. Thank you very much, and very glad to be on the show again. Been doing some great shows with Autonomous Media, and glad that you're on there too. And it's going to be getting better and better over the next few weeks. I've really enjoyed what we've done so far. It's been very focused, and there's a lot of good information there, and I'd encourage people actually go into that archive, because it's not just a radio show. This is really powerful information, even if I do say so myself.
Oh, no, absolutely, Mark. And it's been really great because we have actually visited the origins of the birth certificate. We've talked about the seemingly constructed events that caused a cleansing of sorts. City of London, people mention it all the time, but we actually broke it down historically, explained the atmosphere and the setting of a particular place called Smithfield. There's a great deal of information that I can't even capsulize right here. You're right. They need to go back in the archives through the podcast or at Ochelli.com, or I'm not sure if they're housed at Autonomous Media, but I do know that they have played them all over there.
I've got them on the YouTube channel, Chuck. So Windows on the World YouTube channel contains all the shows we've done, and they're linked onto windowsontheworld.net as well, because obviously we need them on as many platforms as possible, don't we, really?
Oh, no, absolutely. And the thing with YouTube is every time I post something, anything involving you on YouTube, for some reason the two of us together are too toxic for Google. But it's okay. We will get the information out. And those of you that are hearing this right now, you are privileged with something that's apparently a little too hostile for advertiser-friendly content and even to be allowed to be posted in some places. So, brace yourselves as we break these things down. And a lot of it, really, it's great work that Mark has done done, and he's actually taught me a lot in the past few weeks. So I appreciate it. And also with the handicap, again, better looking guy than me. He's only dealing with audio tonight. Go check out his site because you'll actually get to see Mark. And the guy is just entirely professional. Not only is he a journalist, I mean, I broke his chops a little bit at the top there and mentioned the whole thing about John Lydon and all that. But Mark appreciates it. Believe me, I'm not doing anything hostile to Mark. I'm just giving him a gentle ribbing because I really love and appreciate this guy.
That's okay. That's yes, I did actually play Johnny Rotten in a film, but it was a very long time ago. But I do get a little bit of a kick out of you saying, yeah, Mark's a good-looking guy, because I look at myself in the morning and think, God, maybe I was.
Yeah, I can imagine there might have been a time when I was, but that was many a fist fight ago, many a long night ago, many a year. Oh, forget it. Anyway, let's get to the real information.
Many a trauma ago.
That's perfect. See how Mark just bottled it? Many traumas ago, my friends. I might have been a different guy. There you go. So that's the way to open your book, Mark, when you actually write a book about your life, which eventually you're going to have to do, I think, is many traumas ago, I might have been a different man than I am today. There you go. I've just given you your opening line to your book free of charge. How about that?
Absolutely, Chuck, and it will have a happy ending, I'm sure. It's an ongoing process, but what we've been doing really is talking about how we are perceived by the system we're in, what we are to the system, and what we are not to the system, and what we can do about it, and all about this stuff that's controlling us at the moment, political correctness, what they're calling military intelligence terms, controlling the narrative. And they actually openly say this. We've now got people on Facebook. We've got British Army soldiers on Facebook, in Reading in Berkshire, 1,500 of them on Facebook, who are going to befriend you, all you people out there. And it might not just be in Britain, it might be across the pond too. So you're going to have British Army soldiers befriending you and controlling the narrative. So if you are in some kind of debate or put up anything slightly controversial, as we all do, then you may have some people in there who are British Army soldiers on Facebook sitting about controlling the narrative. Now, this is getting very surreal, and I've been talking a lot about this stuff with you and Tony, and what we're really seeing is a post-truth world. We've been talking about this. We're in a post-truth era now, Chuck. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, it's fascinating, the post-truth reality and the unreality of the unreality, actually, because here's the thing, in America, now here I go with the contrasts again, we have an NSA department which is devoted to, guess what, sitting there, and we don't know their actual numbers. That's the beautiful part. We know that there are many thousands of fake Facebook and other social media avatars out there that present themselves as if they were real people. Some of them are very easy to spot. Some of them are not. And they're out there injecting themselves into situations very much like the Sunstein document we talked about, very much like the studies we've talked about. They are embedding themselves into seemingly organic political discussions and steering them. And it comes to mind today, especially here, because, look, I've got to talk about the current event for just 60 seconds. Bear with me. This shooting that went on in Virginia, where you have these congressmen wounded, or actually one of them severely wounded, but other people were wounded as well, and what that means, what the rhetoric means, is it the left, is it the right, all of this hand-wringing and debating. Here's the thing, and a lot of people are already screaming false flag. In fact, my first impression was happy false flag day, because it is indeed Flag Day in America, Mark. And that's how I felt about it, is it looked like a staged event. The more I've looked into it, though, I think what we have is the natural result of pressurizing the public and causing these political debates, which for the most part have nothing to do with individuals' actual lives on a daily basis, giving them this false reality that it is the thing that matters, and therefore you must be motivated to do all kinds of crazy when your life falls apart. Now, over here, a lot of people's lives are falling apart at a faster and easier pace than they ever did, because we're all broke. There's not enough work. There's not enough of anything here, as much as we're supposed to be the most stable, big financial country in the world. So legitimately, when people go through a divorce, they lose their job, they lose their home, they lose everything. What is going to happen to them when they still have these political debates in their minds?
Sorry, Chuck, I was just trying to look up that story that you were talking about then, and something came on. Yes. What we're seeing, though, is an impoverishment of people. And we were talking about this on Tony's show on Sunday. Basically, what they're doing is they're traumatizing the public, and they're keeping them in total fear because of this enforced financial situation and this basically an agenda of poverty, and people don't understand where it's really coming from. And I'm going to talk a little bit about where it's coming from tonight, because we've talked about all the causes and locally where it's coming from, but there's a much bigger figure, and it goes into much bigger picture. And it goes into global governance, and that is something that we've heard for a long time, isn't it?
Well, we hear the term a lot, but I think people fail to recognize what that actually means to them personally. And I know you're going to explain that.
Well, there's an article on windowsontheworld.net I wrote some time ago, and it's called The IMF, UN and Vatican Cabal. I was at a series of lectures about 18 months ago, and I'd already written this article. And there was a lawyer there from Switzerland, and he was talking about how the UN are above international law. And this is a great concern within the legal profession. Now, many people think of the UN as an organization which is supported by all governments, and it's there as, yes, a peacekeeping force, and it's got this kind of very, very friendly appearance to it. But in actual fact, it's quite a dangerous organization, and a lot of things have been done in the name of the UN which are very counter to what they actually profess to be. But legally what they are is a body which is above international law. Now, not many people know this, Chuck.
No, I recognize what you're saying here. You dropped off there for a second.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
But I recognize what you're saying, because the purposes that the UN presents for doing many of the things it does seem to contradict the actual function. I found it interesting a few years ago, even going all the way back to the Kennedy administration, and believe me, there's always more to be learned about that the UN was actually given the ability to control the guns in this country based on something that the Congress passed and Kennedy signed, which was really bizarre to me. But then when I started to look it over, after I, examined the collapse of the League of Nations and all of that, I started to recognize that the UN, and I might be behind the curve here, the UN is absolutely one of those things that is not as advertised.
Absolutely correct. Say your IRS, your Revenue Service, is not a US government agency. It is an agency of the IMF. And that's through case law, which you can actually find on the internet. So that's quite interesting as well. People may not know that.
No, that's true as well. I mean, it's actually a private corporation, registered and everything else, which everybody thinks it's a government agency. It's really bizarre because, again, all of these things that are supposed to be government agencies, which are allegedly serving the people, seem to, serve other masters, don't they? And it's interesting to look at the UN, because you would think that so many different national interests coming together would cause it to have to be, universally one of those instruments of peace, as they advertised it, right? They taught me about this in school, that this was one of the greatest things for the hope of peace across the planet was the United Nations. And, as with many things that I learned in school, I find that it was government re-education more than anything, and had nothing to do with the factual realities. So please continue.
Yes, they're part of the bigger picture of what we're seeing locally. And there's, that's why the article is called The Global Local Cabal. And really what it's about is the way this links in. We've talked about this before, about the UN, how the UN links into what's going on locally. We've talked about Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Now, these things seem remote to most people because they've never heard of them. Even people working within your local area, public servants, will not know what Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 is. And if they do know what it is, they think it's some kind of benign thing, which is all about creating better cities and empowering people and looking after nature, when in actual fact it's a control mechanism to keep us in servitude. And a lot of the things that are happening with this global financial problem, which means that we are in a position, like you were saying, of people not being able to find work. Everybody is in a poverty economy. Now, the idea of Agenda 21 is the poverty economy. It is complete and absolute tyrannical control to remote authority, which would be through your local council to the UN. But to carry on with this, the United Nations specialized agencies, this is from their 1947 UN Charter, are immune to international law. And a lot of people don't know this. So let's have a look at some of the agencies which they list. But this doesn't mean that these are all their agencies. This just means it's agencies that they choose to list. Anything can be an agency. We have to remember that an agent is just a third party that works for another organization or person. So it's just a third-party agent. So they have hundreds of agencies. Now, it says this is from Article 1, the word specialized agencies mean, this was the list from 1947, the International Labour Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, we've all heard of them, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Monetary Fund. Now, this is interesting, isn't it, Chuck? Because the International Monetary Fund, we would think, would be regulated. However, if they are an agency of the United Nations, they are above international law. And we're going to get to what that means in a short while. Also, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development were involved in the so-called women's marches. That was a spin-off to that called the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, these are all Soros-backed marches, which aren't real protests. They're fake protests organized by government. So when we think of the UN as global governance, we're getting a bit nearer to what it actually is. They are controlling the narrative in many ways that people don't realize. So let's carry on with this. Yes, the World Health Organization, the WHO.
Oh, let me interrupt you just for a second here, because when people talk about Soros, he's not the only one out there. He is definitely a player, but he's not the only one out there. I mean, in truth, the Koch brothers also have a great deal to do with this. They have more money than Soros does, from what I understand.
Yes, they were very much part of the women's marches. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But see, they're not the advertised part, because they don't make sense with the mainstream narrative there. You see, Soros is supposed to inflame the left wing, and he's supposed to inflame the liberals. That's usually his role. But the alleged conservatives, they put their money in the same basket, because it's not about left, right, liberal, conservative. It's about destabilization. It's about steering the narrative. So sometimes you support the opposition to give them legitimacy, to make them an enemy, in fact. And on other times you support what it is you're supposed to back, because, well, you back what you're supposed to back. It's literally like a game of chess where you're just spinning the board back and forth and playing yourself, is it not?
Yes, I mean, it's controlling both sides. You know, that's the whole point of this that people don't get, that these groups are on both the left and the right and the middle. So we've been covering a lot of this, and what I've uncovered is it really does come from a background of military intelligence. Indeed, this term, controlling the narrative, which I really like because it describes exactly what they're doing, and they also use it to describe what they're doing. So it's an indisputable term which came from military intelligence. And even in the newspapers, when they were talking about these 1,500 troops who were going to be sat down all day, Can you imagine this, can't you? I mean, they're meant to be training, running about, driving tanks and doing boys stuff. And they're sat there on computers all day. I mean, but would they be dressed in their army gear, or they just sat around with a couple of tinnies and a cigarette? You know, the whole thing is really bizarre when you think about it.
Right. Right. And look, and even they will fund the police state itself. They'll fund the agitators. It's really just a large game to keep the whole thing in motion, you know, and that's why I had this, you know, like I said, the suspect mind emerged immediately when on Flag Day, congressmen who were playing the alleged American pastime, baseball, right, are out there. The Secret Service can't put a guy down with a rifle, or excuse me, not the Secret Service, the Capitol Police, which are different, by the way. The Capitol Police could not put down one guy with a rifle before he fires off 30 to 50 shots. The whole thing stunk from report number one. It does seem to be organic, and in some cases these things are organic. These events, let's just say there are people who legitimately feel as though they needed to participate in the Women's March. There might have been groups that were sucked into it, but the main controllers are not the people that really care about the issue or the issues or the problem du jour that's supposed to be on display here. It's really about controlling how the argument goes, not even the argument itself. Controlling how the argument is actually conducted, right?
Yeah, well, it's bringing it down to something banal, which doesn't mean anything, which was what the Women's March was about. When I looked into who was funding it, there was a company called AECOM, and they were talking about using men as diversity allies. So we're getting this Orwellian New World Order speak, which is political correctness gone crazy, and they're using it as a weapon against the public, and this is a very important thing. So basically, they're weaponizing language and into political correctness, and people are so much into political correctness now they've forgotten what the causes really are, or they appear to have, because those people on that Women's March were absolutely clueless as to why they were there. They had no cause, and a protest, if it doesn't have a cause, is not a protest. So what we were seeing is a day out for the public. Now, in this country, there's a thing called the People's Assembly, which I know for a fact, and I think we've discussed this before, was set up by people within the intelligence services. I had a bit of a heads up on that one because there was a fellow who came into the TV station where I used to work, and he was advertising a demonstration against, guess what? Corruption. So let's demonstrate against corruption, shall we? Okay.
Well, how open in general and almost pointless is that? That's like saying, I'm here to stand against bad people.
That's right.
It's completely subjective. You don't know what you're talking about. There's zero focus. There's absolutely no, perpetrator in mind here. I'm here against bad stuff.
Yes, all right. You've just described exactly what the People's Assembly is. People get bussed in, and this guy put on a demonstration, which was basically turned out to be a police exercise, because there were some journalists down there, photojournalists, and they said, this is really strange, because the police are just doing little tugs of war with certain people in the crowd who are actors, right? They're just the whole thing was like an exercise in how to control the bigger group which were going to turn up, which is the People's Assembly. So people get bussed in, they have their day out, they think they've protested, then they go home again, and everybody's happy because the status quo has not been affected. Whereas you take something that happened years ago here, the poll tax riots. I remember the aftermath of that. That was serious. People really meant business. And what we saw subsequently after that was police closing down things very, very quickly, and lots of agent provocateurs and new groups being invented to take over from the original protest group. For instance, you'd get a squatters group marching in from Hackney, which would not be a squatters group. They're just undercover police who are going to start a bit of trouble with the police to shut the whole thing down. But the aftermath of the poll tax riots in this country was pretty devastating in London, and it was a bad thing because much property was destroyed. Many people's businesses were looted, but it got out of control and the poll tax actually disappeared into a thing called council tax, which our producer tonight, Tony, knows a lot about, and so do I, because we've been fighting this for a long time with unaccountable councils and the whole corrupt way that it's being enforced without any lawful authority. And this is very important, gets back to global governance. So if you've got a global governance through the UN, and they are above international law, then I think this should start waking people up a bit. Let's go to Article 3, Property, Funds and Assets, Section 4. Now, don't fall asleep, people, because this is going to make you mad. Excuse me. The specialised agencies, their property and assets, wherever located and by whomsoever held, shall enjoy immunity from every form of legal process, except insofar as any particular case they have expressly waived their immunity. It is, however, understood that no waiver of immunity shall ever extend to any measure of execution. Now, can you name any other organisation that could put that up and actually get away with it?
Well, look, some people might actually be a bit confused by that language. I'm following the logic here. Let's explain that in a more simple fashion, please.
Yes. Yes. It rolls off the tongue, but basically what it means is they're saying that their premises, United Nations headquarters, are inviolable. Nobody can go in there, even if the police want to arrest somebody or a government has just cause to think that some illegality has happened, or if any member of the public who they serve has any cause of action against them, they are immune. Nobody can enter their buildings, okay?
This goes to the same thing with diplomatic immunity, where people who are allegedly members...
Yes, absolutely. But let's carry on with it, because it says the property and assets of the specialised agencies. Now, we're not talking about the UN here, Chuck. Remember that. This is their agencies. This could be anybody who is a third party of the UN.
So anybody working for the UN, in other words, becomes a third party agent, even if, let's just, break it down again to the absurd. If you're a janitor at the UN, you could sort of claim this because you are an agency which does perform for the UN, are you not?
Absolutely, but that's not really what it's about. It's about their specialised agencies, which are, as we stated earlier, the International Labour Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Health Organization, and the Universal Postal Union, which runs the court systems. Now, this is very interesting. So we're tying in now to the legal system, the Universal Postal Union. So really, what they're actually saying is that it covers anybody who they want it to. So it carries on with the property and assets of the specialised agencies, yes, shall be immune from search, requisition, confiscation, expropriation, and any other form of interference, whether by executive, administrative, judicial, or legislative action. So they've placed themselves completely above the law. And if you read this, it's in that article called The Global Local Cabal on WindowsOnTheWorld.net. It goes into the whole of this 1947 charter, which I think will shock many people. The reason I'm bringing this up is not because of the UN being some kind of remote global governance. It's because this affects directly what's happening to you locally, because the UN are also agencies within your local authority. Because under the Global Action Plan, your local authority signed up through organisations called ICLEI, which was Local Government for Sustainable Development, which is a UN organisation which comes directly into your local council. Look it up. It's the same in Britain, same in the United States. So this is a global governance structure which is above the law. And what's happening, we're seeing in this country, and I know you're seeing it over there, is people's rights are being taken away. Now, a lot of this was on the back of the anti-terror laws. We've had some pretty draconian stuff happening here, as have you over there.
Right. That's been the justification for the removal of a bunch of these rights. And it's interesting because even recently, at some point, I actually want to discuss this whole postal thing with you, because recently they decided to, I don't know how to state it, but I basically no longer have a valid mailing address, which is a weird thing that they just decided to do. Doesn't matter. And they cite a bunch of different codes and things. And
hey, Chuck,
really,
can I
it
just
seems
stop
bizarre.
you a minute? 'Cause I'm very interested in this, because I'm in a similar position, but that's because I don't actually have a physical address, which is very, 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 very good, because you don't get any mail. So how did this happen with you? Are you actually at a residential address and your post was withdrawn? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm at a physical address that has had a service, through them before, and all of a sudden it just stopped coming. And I knew I had, things that were coming in the mail, and I needed some things that were coming in the mail, and they just never showed up. So I would go down to the post office, and that's no longer a valid address. And I said, can you explain that to me? Because I've never heard of that before. It's a physical structure. It's a permanent structure. And therefore, it has had an address. It does count as far as I know. And now they want some money, and they want some other forms filled out. And you got to track down the postmaster to make a decision. And I'm like, where did this all – I'm very confused about it, Mark, actually. It's really strange.
It sounds very confusing, Chuck, because – unless you're living in some kind of little wooden house somewhere in the mountains and it actually hasn't got any access to it, I don't see how that can actually happen in this day and age, because everything's tracked and traced.
That was my argument, actually, is that it exists. It had an address. How is it that you've withdrawn that? But they can, believe it or not.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that ties into really what we're saying. We're talking about remote authority here. And it's unfathomable to most people. So the stuff that we've talked about for the last couple of years, the regeneration, this kind of social cleansing, which is really a form of scientific dictatorship coming in and erasing all culture, replacing it with emptiness, and putting in people who are just using areas to invest money in this country, especially London. So people who actually lived in London are all getting kicked out, and I'm seeing this happening everywhere. But when we're talking about these remote authorities, it is very strange how all this can happen. I've never actually heard of that happening before, but there is something you can use called post restant, which means that your local post office becomes your mailing address, and that is still allowed to be used. It was something that goes back a long way, that goes back probably about 150 years, maybe post restant. It was for people who left their own area, and their post office would collect their mail for them. So you can have a post restant address, which would be your local post office, if you have one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that, because it's a weird fight, to be honest with you. And the strange thing is, the thing that strikes me is that there is no one accountable directly for the decision made. It's very odd. It's passed up the line, generally to somebody you can't find. And I think that this is probably the process which is used for a great many of these things, where you have no one that's accountable, but you're presented with an issue and, or a bill. Right? One way or another, you're presented with something that most people will just, pay, go through the pains of dealing with, whatever. But I think it leads to something else. And this is what we're talking about here. The fact that, even the things that you think are rather standard to your existence, if they involve a remote authority, you could very much be in trouble at the snap of somebody's fingers that you'll never even get to see.
This is what they're doing, Chuck. This is what's very concerning, because remedy is being taken away, our remedy in law. Now, we have inalienable rights. However, under Agenda 21, this thing called sustainable development, it's got a lot of fluffy names to it, as we've discussed. Your rights are removed, because what they're bringing in is a consensus, which means that under sustainable development, for instance, you'd have rights, but you have the same rights as say, a pile of stones, because that pile of stones is a natural thing and it has rights. And this is where it all gets very strange, because what they actually mean by this is that your rights are being removed in favour of what they're calling the natural Gaia, which is their word for earth, which obviously is Greek, but they use the Gaia principle. In other words, that we are a blight on the planet. We should be living for much less time. And when people get old, they should be genocided. And this is really what Agenda 21 is. But it's also about absolute tyrannical police state control. So what we've got running alongside it is this terrorist narrative. Now, none of this is happening. It's happening in parallel. It's all part of a plan. And there's no doubt about that. And it's not a conspiracy theory, because the stuff that I've been looking at in the last few years has pretty much horrified me. But there is a lot of hope, because people are waking up to it. And there are remedies. Our remedy is that we are divine human beings and we have inalienable rights. However, we must start asserting those rights, because if we do not assert our rights, we are presumed to acquiesce and agree to everything that's happening to us. And that's very important. It doesn't matter whether you're dealing with your local council, the police, or anything else. You have to be active in making your rights yours and being heard. And that's very, very important. And it's a thing that most people don't seem to do. And that's why this is accelerating and people are getting caught up in it, and they're losing their homes. They're finding that their rights are being removed. There's more and more homeless people, but the homeless people and the people who are being socially engineered out of London are disappearing. They're actually disappearing. Now, I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy to take them away, some kind of Soylent Green thing, you know. I don't think it's that, but there is something very strange happening, and there is a massive re-engineering of society going on, and everybody can see it in London. People are getting very depressed about it. It's actually, there's a confusion as to what's going on, because they haven't got the references to know what's going on. So when I talk about this stuff, they go, yeah, that's happening, that's happening, that's happening. Then they'll get to a certain stage and it'll be too much for them. They think they wouldn't do that. Well, let's talk about something real quick here, because there are real trends that have to do with things that lead us to theories, unfortunately, because we don't have the answer to, like, say, where the homeless people are going. What we can observe, I think, is that people in general are being sort of funneled into cities in order so that they may enjoy the protection of the city, but they're actually being consolidated into areas so that they can be more easily controlled. Now, homeless people are part of the equation, and they've always been the underrepresented part of the equation, because once you no longer have that recognizable address, the alleged stake in the property game in some way, whether you rented it or bought it, you seem to be a non-person anyway. Now, when we put this next to the fact that you talked about a few weeks ago, how after 7 years past the time of one's birth, you're already considered a lost individual, because you're now available for salvage. It almost makes sense that after a certain amount of years being homeless, you're no longer counted also, even in the system that isn't really for people anyway, but even as a corporate entity, you're lost. And that means, I think, almost anything can be done to you. I'm not here to promote the idea that Soylent Green is happening, but I'm saying that who knows, really? I mean, it is a strange question that remains unanswered. It's an open question, Mark, don't you think? Well, it's not exactly open, because there are conclusions. There is a massive relocation of population happening in London. They basically want everybody out who's not a good taxable slave. So what they've done very cleverly is they've made lots of areas which weren't particularly great to be in into trendy areas. And what they're doing is they're bringing in corporations, and everything's run by Lend-Lease and Bechtel, and all the councils are selling everything off. For instance, their council housing stock is all being sold as brownfield, which means it's like industrial wasteland. So in other words, it can be redeveloped very quickly. So developers don't have to go through any long drawn-out processes where there's consultations. It also means that anybody who bought their council flat will not get the market price for it. They get what they're given, which is a compulsory purchase order.
Now, hang on just a second, Mark. I want the American listeners to translate this because
it's called eminent domain in America, I think, Chuck. It's called eminent domain over where you are.
That is part of the equation, but the other part of the equation that you just mentioned, which is key, is your local town councils will turn around and sell off property and give over rights and change regulations in order to bring in these larger corporate entities. This has been going on now for the past couple of decades. Any town where you've seen major developments where suddenly a whole bunch of chain restaurants pop up, a bunch of other larger staples of, say the Exxon Mobil corporations show up, knockoffs of certain things like who controls Walmart and dollar stores and things like that. All of a sudden, these things will spring up in a development package. The reason is exactly what Mark is talking about. All of that stuff has been sold off to the corporate interests in order to create this atmosphere, this setup where you're going to be funneled into a place where you need to be a good taxable slave in order to maintain that domain, that dominion over that domain that you think is your home, which you don't really own anyway, but that's another issue. The point is that this is exactly what's going on in America. It's just slightly different terms. I want people to wrap their minds around that, and I guarantee you it's probably just a little behind the curve in Canada, but it's already being done there as well. So I'm sorry, Mark. I just wanted to make sure people understood that this is not a problem just in London. Okay.
No, I think people in the States should look at a YouTube channel called Grindle61, where he's going into the One Bay Area meetings in California. And you really need to have a look at that guy's stuff because he is so on this. It's unbelievable. He is at the cutting edge, or was when I last looked at his channel. It was through a lady called Deborah Tavares, who also was putting out all the stuff that I've been putting out over here. And I think she's kind of retired from the scene for a bit, or she's having a break from it. I'm not sure. But if you go and look at her stuff on YouTube, it's absolutely spot on. And it's a template for what the UN are actually doing. This is a worldwide global action plan implemented locally. And even in countries where there is not much infrastructure, the UN are taking hold by building roads for the poor people, taking control of highways, then bringing, after disasters or events that may have happened, earthquakes, etc., they're bringing in their little agents and they're starting to split communities up and empower people. They're empowering women in countries where women have equal rights, really. For instance, Nepal, I saw it happening there after the earthquake. With the UN are in there and they're full of diversity and empowerment. And they're introducing this scientific control cult into countries that have been running perfectly well for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Well, see, and simultaneously what's happening in America is, look, the first indication is you see this corporate development. Then all of a sudden, as we've seen a great deal in recent years, the abandoning of these commercial properties, so on and so forth. Not a big deal because the larger corporation can just write it off. But what has happened is traffic has been redirected. The ability to travel and the facilities by which one can travel have now been altered, and therefore this allows them again to steer the ability to travel, to steer where you're going, what businesses you're engaging with, and it allows them to move you incrementally. So a lot of people might be saying, well, gee, I see a lot of abandoned businesses and things all over the place, which part of that equation is the larger corporation comes in, crushes the honest small business owner. Then they get to redirect everybody because they have all the jobs, all the product, all the things that are necessary, the staples of life, so they can cause you to move in different directions, utilizing different highways, traveling through different towns, actually causing you to live in different places, slowly but surely. And then what we do with these abandoned areas, they rewild them. I think that's
right,
the term
Wildlands
used.
Project. That's what's happening, Chuck. Yeah, it's the rewilding, and basically this has happened massively in California. There's many places now completely cut off, and they're called corridors. So in other words, if you had access to somewhere which was through country roads, they're closing that option off and letting those roads decay to the point where you won't be able to use them. We're starting to see that here, and the escalation of the police state and the prison city in London is really escalating, because I said this a few years ago. I said, this isn't going towards gated communities. They're already talking about it, and they're already there. A lot of these new developments are going to be a gated community with your eye scanner, and you will have your gym, your Starbucks, your Costa Coffee, whatever, your mini Tesco or your Walmart, whatever you have, whatever your big corporate chain stores are, those will be the only thing available. And they're telling everybody that they're supporting small businesses. Is an absolute lie. They're destroying self-employment, because self-employment is all about your ability to be able to support yourself, be free from the state to a certain extent, have ability to trade without the interference of the state. This is what they're trying to shut down. So my advice to everybody is barter and keep them out of your business, and try and shrink these local governments, because they're getting too big and too out of control, and they're not local governments. They're not there for you. They're remote, and they're being run by world government. And that's not a conspiracy theory.
No, it's not. And we see the interlocking police state agencies coming together through what we call fusion centers here, and nobody's talking about them anymore because, hey, after a little while it drops out of the consciousness right down the memory hole, and it's all gone.
Yeah, that's right. It was really interesting what you said the other week, but it's a very strong point I wanted to make here, that what they have in this country is an organization called a Territorial Support Group, right, the TSG. Mm-hmm. And basically, they're like a private army that the Metropolitan Police use. Now, when that London Bridge event happened, with this so-called terrorist event, which I've no idea what went on there, these attacks are not very clear. It wasn't clear whether there was two separate incidents there and the knifings were part of some other gang-related thing. It was very difficult to tell, but I do know that people were actually stabbed, because I did have people who knew people who were there who were eyewitnesses. So we know that. But the point is about these events is that there's definitely an agenda coming together where this is tying in to the global local control grid. And the TSG, a Territorial Support Group, are based in deserted bus garages around London, and they do training all over the place. So basically, when people say, oh, we've got the troops on the street, martial law, we already had them anyway, because this group, the Territorial Support Group, are a private army who are employed by the Metropolitan Police to sort out any conflict situation, and they are pretty aggressive, and I've filmed them. I've been face to face with them, and they are the sort of guys who are ready for a battle. And when that London Bridge thing happened, sorry, Chuck, I just wanted to make this point because I strayed off slightly there, that when the London Bridge thing happened, they were there. And why would they be there post-terrorist attack? The road had been closed, everything had been taped off, there was no suspects running around, but the TSG were there with their riot shields. We're getting to a theatrical point with all of this, where we had these people, I call them martial law terror clowns, which was so ridiculous. They got Metropolitan Police badges on, but they had masks on their faces, they're stormtroopers out of a sci-fi movie with just loads of gear. They're absolutely no use for any form of counter-terrorism. They're just useless. They're just there to scare the public. And then they bring the army onto the streets with this latest thing, but the TSG were there too. So we're really under martial law, as you are there.
Yeah, slightly different flavor here. What they've done is armored and armed the police, more or less, and then they turn loose these snitch organizations that work with all the policing agencies and the government intelligence. They all work colluding with one another to make sure to inform on everybody, and some of them are actually just private citizens who are there to do nothing but be informers. Some others are happily involved in getting themselves, a little badge and showing up on the scene of different events with the sheriff's departments, etc. etc. Mark, we're going to run out of time, but this is a topic we're going to have to continue with because
absolutely,
unfortunately,
Chuck, I think it's all going over too quickly because I only made a few points there, but because this is such a broad thing, you can sort of jump in at any point because it affects every area of people's lives now, and I think they're starting to see that. I've got a venue in North London where we do the filming, and it's traditionally been quite a rough area, a lot of violence there and stabbings, and there was someone murdered in a park there the other day. It's quite a rough area, lots of gangs, but this regeneration thing's happening there. It's all going to happen very quickly. But what we're seeing is the results of the social cleansing already. There's more and more homeless appearing who are then disappearing, as we stated a while ago, and it's not just the population are being displaced. There's a lot going on here that people are actually starting to see, and it's starting to disturb them.
Well, as it should, because this is again the hallmarks, if you will, of some other controlling hand that has nothing to do with your local governments once again, because and I hear people say all the time, look, you got to get involved on a local level if you want to affect politics and all that. I think that people don't realize exactly how deeply infiltrated even their local governments are. And the stuff that they think is this benign sort of, business as usual in the localized areas really is not. It is part of the larger agenda, and we're watching it come down. It sounds like conspiracy theory, but unfortunately, it's only theory when you're working without evidence. There's way too much evidence of what's happening that you're describing for anyone to ignore anymore. And I think even the sleepwalkers out there, those that are, maybe awake but not aware even, there's plenty of them too, Mark. They are starting to get it.
As we know that the word conspiracy theory is actually a military intelligence term to shut down any form of alternative revisionist or journalistic interpretation. So that's coming out of military intelligence. And there was a paper that we discussed, I think, with Tony on Sunday, and it's all come out of this British Psychological Association, and I've done a rebuttal of their new paper, which is tying into a lot of the stuff we're seeing. Basically, they're trying to shut down everything, controlling the narrative. That's really what it is. But it's beyond political correctness now. It's kind of Orwellian and quite scary. And we should get into that again in the next few weeks because there's more and more of it happening all the time.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And of course, the term conspiracy theorist was first popularized in a CIA memo, which was distributed to members of the media and others in order to have them combat those who were actually critics of the Warren Commission regarding the JFK assassination. It is literally a tactical term that they utilized, that they gave to people in order to shut down debate exactly as Mark described. And that's only one example. I am very sure there are many, many more, but that just happens to be the one I am quite familiar with. So,
one
Mark
thing we
Windows,
have to remember, Chuck, last thing I'll say is everyone should remember this. Their trade is treachery, and we have the truth.
That's for certain. And you know what? We don't have to traffic in their trade if we choose not to. We can work with our truth, which is indeed the truth itself. So Mark Windows, windowsontheworld.net. I'm urging you to get over there, especially to enjoy the video experience. But the information that you heard on this show is nothing compared to what Mark puts out constantly, continuously, and has for many years. It's really well done, really interesting. And like I said, a whole lot more information than we could possibly pack into an hour here you can get on this subject and many others. And we're going to continue this discussion. Seems a little strange we do it week by week, but there is so much to unpack, Mark. It's going to take a while, and we're going to do it right here on the show.
Really appreciate it, Chuck. I'm really enjoying it. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. windowsontheworld.net once again. And the Ochelli Effect will return in just a few moments, but we got to take a little break. In the next hour, Sunshine On and Bob. We'll let Bob explain himself when he shows up. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And so the second hour begins here at Ochelli.com, which is where the Ochelli Effect originates from at this point. We do welcome you no matter which network you are hearing us on, because there are several that carry the live stream, and we do appreciate every one of them for doing so. And also, we're happy to have you along if you're catching this on podcast further on down the stream via your applicable application and your fondle slab of choice. Anyway, I have Sunshine On with me, who is usually with me on Wednesdays in the second hour as of late, and I do appreciate her participation. We had a little bit of an issue trying to bring in Bob, and we're going to try and bring him in again and see if we can get a decent audio quality. If we can, we're gonna do that. If not, we're gonna have to reschedule Bob. So I was really looking forward to this, though, Sunshine. How about you?
I was too, Chuck. Thanks for having me again on this week, and I really was. You know, today's been an incredible day. It just seemed like one thing after another today, and it's really important, I think, for us to find some balance in all of this. And I think that Bob is the other end of the spectrum and can help with that balance.
Well, there we go. Now we seem to have Bob with us, and it's feeding back a little bit. Bob, how are you doing, man?
Well, Charles, I'm doing awesome, mate, because I am master and commander of my life. and that may sound trite. How's the sound? Is it good for you? Is there a time delay? Or shall I just proceed? And how do you wish me to proceed?
We're having a bit of a rough time. And I'm feeding back to myself and probably on the stream too. I think, Bob, we might have to revisit this at a later date, because unfortunately we're going to have to coach you a little bit on the Skype, I think, to get it a little more smooth, man. But I really look forward to getting into your message.
Yeah, well, Charles, hang on a minute, because what I'll do is I've contributed to over 200 shows worldwide, so I don't be tutoring on Skype. But what I will do is connect via my laptop instead of my phone and see if that improves anything. So I'll turn off my phone, and if you can call me again and pull me in via my laptop, hopefully things will be much clearer. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure. Let's give you about 5-7 minutes to set up and see if we can get you better on the laptop. Anyway, back to it. You know, Sunshine, it has been an interesting day. And I don't mean to put Bob aside like that. It's just that, you know, we're in the business of doing an audio-based show, and we got to be able to hear him. And I want to hear his message, which is very positive. And he talks about really taking control of oneself in a spiritual way, and choosing to guide one's own destiny. Now, I don't want to speak for him, but I have spoken to him off air, where he did sound quite a bit better. And and honestly, I think it's a good message to get at. Now, we could look at the negativity around us, Sunshine, and of course we always do, because we're just those kind of people. We have to recognize the darkness in order to realize that we are the light sometimes, yes. I think. And it's been an odd day. It is, it's the birthday of my oldest child, which, you know, if she happens to be listening, wherever she may be, I hope she's enjoying the day. It's also the birthday of, Orange Julius there in the White House. And coincidentally, a day when we have an attack, in America, a gun-wielding guy deciding to shoot up congressmen, which, okay, I'm going to try and control my mouth here very carefully. I will say that I guarantee there are people out there who have gotten themselves deeply immersed in all of this that might at some point or other almost had a similar urge. But it doesn't mean that I ever endorse violence. Even dumb animals don't deserve to be shot for no reason. So, and even those who seem to ramp things up and purposely cause us to be in heated discussions, much ado about nothing most of the time, because it's really irrelevant as to who's a left-winger, who's a right-winger, who's in support of this person or that person, that's only going to be around just for so long until they've robbed us blind enough to be able to retire, because that's what those gangsters in the not so expensive suits, because, real gangsters wear decent suits. Politicians do not. Okay. And they are generally like wannabe gangsters, and they do it pretty well. I mean, they still, criminally gain their gains as much as any other gangster. But, quite honestly, I just have less respect for them. Anyway.
Yeah. That particular incident that you're referring to, I don't post much on my Facebook it's mostly my family, but as of late, I've really kind of gone on little rampages of postings, and I think that my intent in doing so is to get people to just start questioning, why is this happening? What's really going on? That people are being pushed to this place of feeling like this is somehow a solution to the problem. And if we can just start asking those questions along with many other questions, I think that is part of what I'm trying to do for myself personally, trying to encourage others to do as well, and get to the root of some of these problems that are happening, the cognitive dissonance, the inability to communicate effectively, the inability to understand each other. Why are these things going on? Who's pushing those things is something that you talk about all the time. And I think that those things are very important things to talk about. Normally I wouldn't post something like that, but I had to because I had to ask people the question.
Wait, Sunshine. You know what, though? I think that the thing that's being missed, and I'm listening to your thought process because you're an honest person, you're speaking straight from your own mind, your own heart, and I know that you mean well, but do you realize you're getting lost in all of these different things and allowing your emotions to get driven? I know you realize it. Fourth wall being broken here for the listener. I know you realize that I'm doing this to make a point. Thank you. Anyway, back to the show. The deal is that we need to focus on ourselves, not in a selfish manner like everything revolves around me and I am the world, although that is sort of a unfair character for me to slap this with at the moment. But what I'm saying is the whole world isn't necessarily you, but you are definitely part of the world. And you, as an individual, have the ability to work on yourself, change your perspective, change your attitude, change the attitude of the people that are immediately around you. This is an effective thing you can do on a daily basis that has nothing to do with all of these arguments and struggles and tugs of war and, battles on social media about, well, but I support this, but I support the other side, but they told me that's the other side, but I'm on the right side, but you're on the wrong side, you're on the left side, you're on the lib side, you're on the, you know what I mean? What it comes down to at the end of the day is it's a big distraction from the one thing that we all have the ability to improve, right? Which is ourselves.
Right. And that is the point. And that is the root of the questioning. Why is this happening? Something internally is wrong with, well, I can't say wrong with everybody, but when I was looking into the cognitive dissonance thing, okay.
I'll say it. It is wrong with everybody.
It really is, and it's a lifetime. I mean, we have a lifetime. We're born into these systems of indoctrination and these false narratives that, I mean, our entire lives, and it actually goes back generations. So it really is a very deep and personal thing, and we do need to start asking why. Why are other people doing it, and then what am I doing myself? What am I doing for myself that my thought processes are the way that they are? And it is an individual choice. It always boils down to a choice. How are we going to what is it that we're thinking? What is it that we're feeling? And what are the words that we're saying? And if we really start being aware of all of that, then I really think that things can change individually and then collectively. And I think that what Bob was going to talk about, and what I try and talk about as far as the positive side of what's happening, there is a balance that needs to happen. I know that I have spent plenty of time focusing on all of the negative, and I did come to a point where I needed to start taking a look at myself. And although it kind of goes against my nature of this whole saving humanity thing and feeling almost selfish for taking a moment and stepping back and doing what's best for me first. It's kind of like that airline thing, when the gas mask, or not the gas mask, the oxygen masks fall down, put it on yourself before you put it on your child. It kind of falls in that line. If we don't take care of ourselves first, how are we going to take care of each other in a positive way?
Well, and here's the thing. You can, at every moment, you have another choice. Okay, at every moment, and all you really have is the moment to begin with. But at every single moment, you have another choice, and your choices really involve what it is you choose to engage in on all levels. And it's not something, it sounds like, oh, here he goes with the philosophical nonsense. It's not. It's a very real thing. Now, hopefully we have Bob straightened out. There he is. And I know that Bob is going to talk to us today about taking control of one's own destiny, which is something that every single person listening has the ability to do. I think, Bob, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, mate, and what a great place to start. Yeah, it's really good to connect with you, Charles, and as I said before in our communications, I will never call you Chuck because the words I use are my spells and I cast them wisely, so I won't be chucking away. So for me, and all I want to talk about is personal empowerment, because for me that is the way forward. When everybody can find their own place within themselves where they truly know who they are. Like Charles, I feel like I'm made of unobtainium, mate. I have this sense within me that is indestructible. It's warm, it's safe, and it's, like I said, freedom is an inside job. And I'm just an ordinary bloke. I served my time as a fitter turner in England and lived the magazine life with, good job with SO research, wife, 2 kids, all that sort of stuff. But all my life I've been very, very sensitive and just knew there was something wrong. So I think rather than read you my whole life story, which would probably take 20 minutes, I'll just go. Well, I sent you a copy anyway. But for me, I'll go to the pivotal moments. 1984, I first had my first attack of depression. And then, like everybody else in Western society, I believed what somebody else said about me, that there was something wrong with me. And I believed that for years. So I took all the drugs and the medications. Now, the realization I came to after 20 years was, well, hey, I'm the only expert on my life, so why am I listening to other people? And I've known me longer than anybody else. So I just, instead of listening to other people, I listened to me. But I had to silence my mind to be able to do that. So
well, hang on, Bob. Well, hang on a second, Bob, because, I view psychiatry much as a black art as anything else, quite honestly, and it is evident in the wording that they utilize. It is evident in the title that they use. These are not doctors, but they certainly are practitioners of something. And the reality is that sometimes it's good to have a sounding board, though, and to have someone else's perspective on you. But when it's tainted by the conventions of this thing we call psychiatry or psychology, it gets into a very twisted area. Don't you agree?
Well, what I would like to do, Chuck, is just to share what's present for me, and I'd like to imagine that we're all elders gathered around the campfire, sharing our truth in turn. For me, I now live in the now, and so any interruption breaks the flow. So what I would like to do is complete my response to your question, and then I'll put the talking stick down and you can pick it up, if that's okay with you. But how I gained my sovereignty, and I'm just taking control of what I need to do here, which is another mark of my own sovereignty. And I believe that where I am in my life now, all are equal and all are unique, and everything builds from that. Going through my life and dealing with depression, and I suddenly realized that life is simple. I'm experiencing a pain, and it would be stupid for me to medicate it because it's not going to cure it, and it'd be stupid for me to learn coping skills to live with it because I don't want to live with it. I want to find out a way through it, and the way I've found through it is by feeling it, by jumping into it, embracing it, dancing it. And I came to the realization that depression is nothing more than a spiritual wake-up call. It's a rite of passage. So in my life, at that time, I'd just become a commercial skipper, Captain Bob, Jim lad. And once I got on the boat, it's like I put a different hat on. I suddenly realized that I was totally responsible for everything that happened on that vessel. The lives of the crew, the lives of the passengers. If the crew stuffed up, I was still responsible. And so all I did was I took that ideology and applied it to my life. Now, I don't like the word sovereign because it brings up pictures of fat old women with crowns on their heads. What I like is the term, I am master and commander of my life. And so from that position, that platform, as master and commander of my life, I sat down one day and thought, well, what's my purpose? What am I here for? And as master and commander, I set my own purpose. And I set my purpose to be, just to simply find my own truth. So that's my purpose for this physical experience. And then the next one I was pondering, okay, because I'm so powerful, how do I want to experience my life? So I set my own conscious life intention, which is I am here to have a gentle, joyful, loving, and abundant life. And since I set that command to the universe, that is my direct command, and that I am here to have is really important because it's not only telling the universe what they're going to deliver to me because I am creator, but it's also my address so they've got somewhere to deliver it. So since I made that statement, that's how my life unfolds. I'm just coasting now. And every day I sit back and review my day and see how it's been just a little more gentle, loving, joyful, and abundant. But I live this. I feel this. This is in my heart. Now, as master and commander of my life, and I do have an amazing intellect, but I put it to sleep. It's in the dog basket at the moment, so I'm not using it at the moment. But as master and commander of my life, and I'm totally responsible for everything that happens in my life, I'm responsible for meeting my needs, and only I am responsible for meeting my needs, and one of my needs is nurture, so which is food, clothing, shelter, nature, nurture. Now, I'm very aware of what's going on in the world. I'm rabid on the internet, checking out what's going on. When I let my intellect go for a run, that's what I send it to do, which is why I connect strongly with Max Egan and Wayne Dyer and Matt Passo and Robert Arthur Menard and, I could go on, but that's all headspace stuff. So all of that stuff and the law and politics and science and all, if I've got to the position now where if something is not nurturing for me, I simply call it the beast, and I no longer feed the beast. I give my time and attention into creating the life that I want to experience. And I am experiencing it, Charles, I am. Recently I lost my home on the boat. I was out there for 8 years to Cyclone Debbie. And most people think, oh, God, you lost everything. Yeah, but here I am. I'm 65 next month. I've got a clean slate. I've got a few dollars in my pocket, and I'm ready for the next adventure. The lesson I learned from losing my home was to let go of attachment to things, because things aren't important. What I took from the boat was my 2 dogs and me, and we got off before the storm really came in. So what is working for me is I have found myself. I had to go back and heal the wounds of childhood. I had to deprogram myself from codependent behavior, which is the most insidious state of dis-ease in Western society, and we can explore that later. And also all the social, cultural conditioning that goes on. I just woke up one day and realized that everything I'd been told was a lie. And that was a hell of a shock. But from that shock came an awakening, and now I question everything. And if it doesn't resonate with my heart, then it is not part of my truth. And I'll just say three little lines and then close. I need a sip of coffee and smoke a cigarette. I'm no saint, but I am content, Charles. I am totally content with me. Now, as I said, my belief is that all are equal and all are unique. And unsolicited advice is abuse. That's the big one that steered me right out of codependent behavior. And the other one is that all opinions are worthless, because all I'm doing now here is sharing my personal life experience. So I'm not interested in your opinion of my truth, because one, it's not going to change my truth. Only I can do that. And two, it doesn't tell me anything about you other than you've got a load of opinions. What I would like you to share is, if you've had a similar experience, share your truth, share your life experience, because opinion is hearsay. It has no standing in court. And I think I've said enough for now, Charles. What'd you say? Shall I put the stick down?
Yeah, I would appreciate it just for a moment, because after all, it is my show, so it's kind of my campfire, and usually I guide the conversation quite a bit, but you said quite a bit there that did touch part of my experience, and I am dying to hear what Sunshine has to say. But before I kind of turn it over to her, which I do anxiously wish to do, here's the thing. I will object a little bit to the way you're communicating with me, and I'll tell you why. I don't like the words master and commander. First of all, I don't like the use of that legal fictional name, which I always joke that bill collectors and police officers will refer to me as Charles. I decided to be called Chuck because to me, Charles is the name that was given to a child that was long abandoned and dead. Now, that is a political statement and a spiritual statement. Let's understand that. So now, moving forward, I will say this. I think the key phrase that you repeated there over and over again, whether you were aware of it or not, I wish to show it to you, because it is the one that I have learned that gave me a key, and I feel as though it's extremely useful. The first part is, I am. Many times you said, I am. In truth, my friend, my brother, in fact, here in this experience, I will tell you that is actually the key that I feel I can use. I am. It is literally the statement of divinity. It is literally the statement of reality that needs to be understood. It is precisely what is in many a scripture in one form or another. Even when the chief deity refers to himself, generally speaking, it is said, I am he who is called I am, or I simply am. And this is the realization of the position in the universe that I do believe and do understand and do recognize that I am part and parcel of. And so are you, and so are all of those who can hear and comprehend what it is we're saying tonight. And we need to recognize this. So this is how I feel about it, Bob. And with that, and how I recognize the world around me, just to understand it. And yes, I do realize my experience will vary from yours. We are presentations here in the same reality, but there is certainly different experiences being garnered by those expressions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sunshine, because I'm sure her head is buzzing with things she would like to add into this discussion. You're laughing, but am I right or wrong?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Okay. Well, first of all, Chuck, I didn't know. I had no idea that you're I am that as well. And that is just mind-blowing to me. So thank you for saying that, and I'm so glad to hear it. And Bob, I actually have been taking notes because there were so many things that you did touch on that are it's so exactly my feelings on a lot of things. From, you had mentioned elders, having a conversation amongst elders, and I really, really have a strong connection for women and the whole midwifery, that knowledge and that wisdom that was passed down from woman to woman in that area of midwifery, and how that was eliminated from society, and how I think it really was a very destructive move by design, probably. Or obviously. And so that really resonated with me, and I appreciate that. And I feel like I have really wandered into a community of people who encompass that term elders. And that's also why I really am wanting to try and bring the millennials into the conversation at some point. I know for myself, and this was, you talked about the feelings, and I know for myself that was, I'm a very feeling-based person, and I didn't have someone in my own life that I could communicate effectively about what I was feeling, maybe because they weren't feeling the same thing or as deeply as I was. And to have had someone, I often think, how different life would be if I had someone who could help me understand that better, or grasp it better, at a younger age, because it did take me many, many, many years to come to terms with my feelings, and take control, my power and control over them, rather than letting them control me. So that was a really big thing that you touched on as well. So I can go on, but we'll take a break here for a second from that. But yeah, conscious life intention. I really think that this is huge. The consciousness and everything that we do are from our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Being very aware rather than just drifting along or allowing ourselves to be guided by others without even taking a moment to stop and think about what it is that we actually feel or think or act in our own way, and for what reason, which is like what we talked about at the beginning, Chuck.
Well, right. And I'd like to actually ask a question of Bob, if that's all right with you, Bob.
Always, my friend. I would just like to say in response to your earlier statement that, I'm just sharing my truth. And because we're all unique, I expect people to disagree. I'm not looking for agreement or disagreement, because for me, truth is not good or bad. It's not nice or nasty. Personal truth is just personal truth. And I'm looking forward to the day when more people can find their own personal truth and have the courage to share it amongst themselves, like the elders do or did, or We'll get there. Okay. Sorry, I'll shut up now. I talk too much.
No, it's great. No, you're doing excellent, man. I'm really happy. I don't know how many radio shows you've done or whatever, but this is going quite smashingly, as some people might say in my circles now. The fact is that you make a very important point also, aside from the things I mentioned earlier here when I responded to you, and that is the need to not be possessed by your possessions or your alleged possessions. The only things in this world I own, sort of, are that which I use for this broadcast, okay? Outside of that, I own nothing, and really, I also understand that really don't own them either. But if you were to come by my place, you would say, well, that's all he owns. But I don't take ownership. I don't require ownership. I don't require dominion over anything or anyone outside of myself. And this is my attitude. This is my truth. And I think it was many earlier experiences where I found that ownership is not a stable existence for anything. Yes, divorces, one divorce, and a couple of other wonderful experiences showed me that really, truthfully, you don't own or hold on to anything. They were actually excellently painful lessons that were taught to me repeatedly, that really you are meant to be here to not even appreciate the things you use, but simply use them. And as a great philosopher who happened to be a stand-up comedian once said, I think it would be best to advise, and I do advise people of this all the time, that they should spend a lot more time loving people and using things as opposed to using people and loving things. And this would make them a great deal more happy and, well, hey, it might actually allow them to fit into the universe around them a whole lot more seamlessly if they took that attitude. So I'm wondering what you have to say about, possessions, especially coming from a time where you just lost everything again. And I've done that several times in my life. Yeah. Please, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that a little bit, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, sure, Chuck. And one thing that's really present for me is that statement, I am. I am that I am, and I am content. But possessions, that was a big lesson for me. And it was, my boat was my home, is all that I owned apart from a beat up old Pajero 4-wheel drive. But I didn't own it. And I have a name. I am not a name. And so under this maritime existence, everything that I have registered actually belongs to whoever I registered it to. So, even if I call it my car in maritime law, I'm just known as the registered keeper. So I've been down that rabbit hole and played that game. And now, it's like I don't have to play that game anymore because I live in heart space and I live within me. And all I need to know is within me. My possessions, what do I value? What do I value above all else? How do I know what I love? What I give my time to? And that's my 2 dogs. They're my family now. Walking my path, I lost my wife, my children, a great career with SO, walking my path because I knew I had to stay in Australia. So I've given everything away in pursuit of my own journey, and my journey is just to find my own truth. And really, it doesn't matter what it costs me. That journey is vital to me. Doing that work is vital to me because, if I don't heal myself, how can I heal anybody else? If I do not love myself, how can I love anybody else? And I love the Bible. I'm totally non-religious, but I believe I'm very spiritual. And the Christ message of I am the way, the truth, the light. For me, that was not the claim of Jesus. That was a plea to every living human being to scream that out with all the energy of their hearts to say that I am the way, the truth, the light. Because for me, the way universal truth is for everybody to find their own truth and then share that. So, and while I'm on the Bible, sorry, Charles, there's a great story in there that Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. I haven't seen them in my garden, but yeah, they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, out of paradise, for eating from the tree of knowledge. Now, what that says to me is that the pursuit of knowledge is the original sin. So for me, science and technology is a willing slave, and a wonderful slave, but a deadly master. And I think with Western society, it's gone too far down the road of worshipping science and technology as the solution. For me, for science and technology to try and explain consciousness is like my car trying to explain me. It ain't going to happen. My mind is just a part of me, you know. It's a tool that I use. I think I've gone off topic a bit, Charles, but tends to happen.
I don't think so at all, Bob. But quite honestly, I think you're doing just fine. I would like to address one thing and then get Sunshine's take on it after I do so. Here's the thing. When you discuss, and here it is, I identify myself this way, and some people don't like it, but I call myself a pagan for a very specific reason, and but I recognize the absolute truth that is contained in that text that you referenced. I am not a Christian in any way, shape, or form. Do not take it this way when I make this statement. What I see in that text, though, is quite a bit different, and I've seen it in many other texts. And what it says to me is that this character, which some people will refer to as Yeshua, some people will refer to him as Christ, Vishnu, the various deities, sons of the deities, etc., throughout human history. This is not a God to be worshipped. This is the template, in fact. And I think the lessons that are contained in that book, even though they have been greatly twisted, and many other people's messages in a spiritual sense have been twisted to serve others' interests. The idea here is that the divinity is within because we are that creation, and I'm merely the template, is what Jesus, or the character of Jesus, was saying. Again, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him, because the letter J wasn't invented till much later, etc., etc. I know all that. I'm saying that there is truth contained in the book, whether it's historically accurate or not. It's absolutely truthful when we examine it from that angle. That is not a popular sentiment among many people, but I feel as though that is the overall lesson. And I'd like to get Sunshine's take on it, and then, of course, yours, Bob.
Great.
Sunshine?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's a neighbor's dog, and I apologize if you guys hear it yapping in the background. So I was just yelling out the window, actually.
It's okay. Dogs are welcome here. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, I agree with this perspective that religion versus spirituality. Where can truth be found? Can it be found in all of it? And has it all been skewed to some degree or another? I would have to agree with all of that. I know that, what is discernment? I'm sorry, that to me is knowledge, gaining information, and then being able to decipher for yourself. That is where, for me, discernment is found, how it pertains to my life and the people that I love and humanity in general. So Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm sorry, I got distracted by the yappy dog.
Well, it's no problem. Let me just ask you to address the one part real quickly. I know I'm being a little rude here, but the idea that the Christ figure and many of these other religious templates that have been presented to us are not necessarily there for worship, but I think are there as examples to explain to us that we have the capability of ascension. Again, when one reads the words that are allegedly memorialized by that Christ figure in the Bible, you find that he says things like, you can do this yourselves. It's really interesting, in fact, that I am the example is effectively what I take away from that. And I was wondering what you thought of that. And then, of course, I want to hear from Bob on it as well.
Sure.
That might have been the part you missed. So what do you think about that as the Christ and others, in fact, in other religious texts being the template virtually, which is why the story seems so repetitiously brought about through, everything from the story of Gilgamesh to Horus to Christ. It seems as though we have the very same story being told over and over again to teach us something that has been hijacked by those that control organized religion. Yes, but what do you think about that as the concept? As I said, not a popular sentiment among many people that I know. And again, I am not a Christian at all.
Well, actually, Chuck, I do think that this character, this person who I do think is an example for us all as to who we really are and what we're really capable of. And that has always been my thought. Well, not always. I take that back. That has been my thought for a very long time. But there was a point in time when I was into the religion. Now, I don't discount people's journeys and the path that they're on. And if communing with a group of people who have a positive intention is helpful to someone in their life, then I'm not going to try and tell them that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Hopefully their journey will end up, as mine did, in more of a looking and discovering that there is something beyond that organized religion, but I'm not going to discount it for anybody. And I think that that's that kind of, there's a bias that happens when we adopt some of these indoctrinations, and unfortunately it prevents people from obtaining information, because information can be found anywhere. And if the person delivering that piece of information happens to have a particular belief, and we stop ourselves from hearing the information based on their belief being different than our own, instead of being able to look past it and just see the information being presented, they're really, cutting themselves off from gaining that information. And I find it very frustrating and unfortunate that seems to be really a big thing. So when I communicate with people, whether they have a particular belief system or that is different from my own or from others or what have you, I try and very, very carefully choose my words, that I don't put myself into any group or category or definition that's been made up by somebody else's label of what that is. I can know what I know, and you can know what you know. And that's great because we probably kind of in some way know the same thing. I don't have to discount yours and you don't have to discount mine. And I'm certainly open to hear yours. And I think that if more of that could go on, that would be really fantastic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And as we get toward the latter half of, or I should say the latter portion of this hour, I really want to hear from Bob about this and then give him a chance to sort of close things out, get his final thoughts on this discussion tonight. But before we do that, I think it's really great, Sunshine. What you said there is extremely important, that we do not have to discount the spiritual belief systems of others to reinforce our own, I think is a very important lesson. I think it's something that many people fail to understand, that they do not have to attack others, even if it does seem simplistic, silly, limited, whatever. If it works for them, and it does do the right thing, I see no reason to object, so long as there is no harm being done and they are progressing as best they can. You know, not everyone was meant to be a marathon runner, and not everyone was meant to be someone who could even articulate in public and speak, but we all have something to say, and we all have races to run. So with that, I turn it back over to Bob.
Well, thanks, Chuck. And what I would like to say is, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just here to add my spice to the cake. That's all I'm here to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and what a beautiful cake we're making together. And that's the way forward. But what springs to mind for me as an overview of what's just passed is that in the universe there's only one law, and that's what I give my attention to, I become conscious of. During this physical experience of me on Earth, then there is only one rule, you know, do no harm. And as a human being on this planet, I only have one right, and everything stems from that right. And my right is to simply thrive, to have the ability to thrive just like every other species on the planet. Now, within my own inner journey, I found a place within my heart that I call my knowing, and my knowing has no words. It's all about.
I totally agree, Bob. Thanks for saying it.
And this place of knowing, and I'm getting better at it now. The more time I spend in that space, and the more time I keep my mind in the basket with my little puppy dogs, the more time I spend in that space, my connection to this knowing place, I call it the universal library of all that there is to know. Some people know it as the Akashic Records, but I have a strengthening connection to that place, and whatever I need to know comes from there. As I travel through this physical life, how do I find my truth? Whatever comes to me, it either resonates with my heart and becomes part of my truth, or it doesn't resonate with me. I boiled it down to two simple things. If something's approaching me, it's either a snake or a teddy bear. If it's a snake, I don't go there. I don't enfold that into my journey. But if it's a teddy bear, I will embrace the teddy bear. So if it doesn't resonate with my heart, then it's not part of my truth, not part of my journey, and certainly not part of what I manifest and create in my life. And I do create my life, and I've created a brilliant one for me. I've achieved my goal of contentment, and I will never give advice because I can't, because everybody's unique. And I liked what you said about my belief is that everybody has to make a conscious choice about their life and then find their own answers to get there. And that's what it's all about. Everybody has to find their own tools and their own answers to achieve what it's got to be a conscious existence. And more people are waking up. And I'm so glad to be alive at this time in the evolution of consciousness and humanity, because for me, the evolution of consciousness is exponential. It's just turned the corner. The beast is dying. It's all over Red Rover. Hang on for a wild ride to what we deserve to be. You know, brothers and sisters living in harmony and not competition. We have to move away from competition to cooperation and get back to common unity. We don't need law. We don't need lawyers. We just need to sit around a campfire and share our truth and sort things out, because I'm sharing my truth and that's all I have, you know, and you share your truth. And hopefully it'll be different. Let's celebrate our differences instead of beating each other over the head with them, you know, because that's why psychiatry and psychology is, you know, just, it's a scam, you know, it's a shell game. It's just stopping people from feeling. As I said earlier, thinking is the weapon of mass distraction. I found all my solutions, and that's SOUL, solutions, in my heart. My mind can only provide answers. Okay, I'll shut up now. And I'd just like to say thanks, Charles, and thanks, Sunshine. And it's really, really nice to be part of a group where I just feel safe to share my truth. You know, I've been to so many different forums and where people are claiming to be sovereign, but, you know, it's, how can I put it? I think the biggest loss that Western societies had is when religion came in and took all the old rights away. You know, the way that we used to relate to nature. I'm surrounded by 50-year-old, 5-year-olds because none of them have been through the rite of passage to move. Okay, they've aged physically, but the elders and the wise people in their communities no longer exist, so there's nobody left to take them through the rite of passage to spiritual and emotional adulthood. You know, anyway, we could talk. I'd love to talk more on this, Charles, and I hope you'll have me back. And it's nice to catch up with you, Sunshine. And yeah, all I know is, and I've worked as a counsellor, I can't wake anybody up, and I do not give advice. So the only thing I can do, and I do this daily with everybody I meet, is I just let my light shine brightly. And that shining light attracts people and they start asking questions. And then the dialogue begins and the seeds are sown and the light bulb goes on. So that's.
Oh, did we lose him?
We might have just lost Bob, but, you know, very, very profound and prolific were the statements that he made. And yes, we will have Bob back on. I'll be more than happy to bring Bob back on at a future date and get him to share more of his truth on this show. That's for sure. Looks like we got a little bit of a feedback issue. So, we'll straighten that out and move forward. Here's the thing. I want to sum up this entire conversation by making a statement which has been made by many other people. I am borrowing it from many smarter people who came before me right now when I say this. The fact is that at every moment you do have a choice. I had said that earlier, but there's an addendum to that, and it is this. Your choices boil down to two very simple things based on my observation, and they are you can live in a state of fear or you can live in a state of love. That are the two choices that one has. That is the two choices one has. There I go, misspeaking. But the point is that you can choose to embrace or to exist in one of these spaces or the other. In fact, anger, jealousy, pain, most of these things, well, pain is a constant for me, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It just happens to be at the moment, and it doesn't need to be the thing that causes me to fear. Fear is the one thing that I think is the greatest hindrance to all of us when we attempt to evolve, and evolving is not a bad thing. When we attempt to evolve, because we did not land here necessarily with all of the knowledge at our disposals that we may gain through this experience, but we always had access to it. And the deal is that when you live in fear, you will restrict your access from a great many things. When you embrace the concept of love in truth, okay, in truth, you will find that things expand, not contract, that things are safer, not more dangerous. You will find that fear is really the greatest control mechanism ever utilized by those that wish to herd us as cattle and to handle us as such. Anyway, Sunshine, I go to you for the sort of final thoughts here, and I think we've accomplished something tonight that was rather fascinating, might have been, a little bit odd for some listeners, but I think it's very important. So what do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more that I would love to engage in more of these kinds of conversations. I think that it does strike probably more of a chord within people than others might think. And, I come back to some words. Words just to me are so important. The words that we speak, the words that we choose, and it is a choice. And I think that I'd like to have people maybe consider certain words and what they mean to them and how they manifest them in their life. And the ones that stick out for me are judgment and tolerance and acceptance, but most of all, respect. And I think if we were to really take a close look at how we utilize those thoughts and our feelings about those words and actually embrace more tolerance, acceptance, get rid of judgment, and just bottom line, show each other respect, then we're good to go, Chuck.
Well, and there it is. Look, they call it spelling for a reason, and you are spelling as in a verb. You are casting spells with every word you speak and relate. Believe it or not, this is part of the empowerment that has been lost. What did, in many of these stories, again, I refer back to even the typical religious texts, all of those that are considered ancient understanding, so on and so forth. Notice the power when the gods speak. Notice the power when those who have control over a situation speak. Notice what is wielded in that way. The bottom line is that you as I don't like the word master or commander, but you as being the one who is, literally I am, have the power within your own realm to cast your own spells with your own words. Consider them carefully. Use them. Don't allow them to use you. And I think it's always a good idea to consider what it is you're speaking, what it is you are putting out, what it is you are emanating from yourself. Notice Bob said, I let my light shine brightly, and then others are attracted to it. Not as moths to a zapper, okay, but as individuals who wish to bask in a light and be part of it. This should be the motive, and like I said before, it is a matter of your consideration, and you should always, here I am giving advice, right? Because I've made a lot of mistakes in this way. You should always consider the words you speak, the things you're putting out into the universe, because ultimately they will, in one way or another, you can call it karma, you can call it prayers, you can call it God's response, you can call it the entities around me are actually interacting with the things I'm putting out, you can call it whatever you want. But the fact is, you have the power to dictate your own experience here, and it doesn't have to be based in fear. That is the one thing that I would like to see abolished from anybody's life who I encounter, who is literally a spiritual being and doesn't appear to be spiritually dead, because there are husks wandering around out there as well. They're unfortunate, but I'm not in control of their loss. The idea is that those who are redeemable, I do believe are redeemable by abandoning fear itself. Yeah. So Sunshine, I think it was a great 2 hours altogether. Mark Windows was with us in the first hour. We discussed some pretty intense information and some intense ideas that people need to wrap their minds around. But I think this discussion about self-empowerment and the ability to literally dictate where your experience is going is equally as important. What do you say?
I agree 100%. I thank everybody for joining us and listening in on the conversation. I would encourage everybody to continue on with the conversation with your close personal loved ones, with your neighbors, with your coworkers, whoever is in your life that wants to talk and have a really good discussion.
Well, absolutely. And listen, further on in the week, we're going to, I'm going to actually take and make a list of all the executive producers that need to be recognized, people that have contributed to the effort. And we're going to go through that. I also have Carmine Savastano coming up tomorrow night and Jordan Maxwell on Friday. Maybe a surprise guest will drop in with us on Friday as well. We'll see how that goes. I almost think we need to bring Bob back next week. We'll have to check and see what his scheduling is like. What do you say, Sunshine?
Sure. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a really good conversation. We talked about a lot of really, really fascinating things that maybe people haven't thought about too much. And it's definitely a really good balance again, Chuck, a balance to everything else that's going on in the world. We have to balance it with the positive message as well.
Absolutely. And the revelation of the conversation, as I like to phrase it, will continue here at Ochelli.com. The Ochelli Effect is done for this Wednesday night, but we got 2 more live nights, and don't forget the stream runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Take care, everybody. You're listening to Ochelli.com Radio Network, the alternative's alternative and home of the Ochelli Effect. WallStreetWindow.com. Gold, silver, the stock market. WallStreetWindow.com. The brilliant author of The War State brings you exclusive reports about the big changes upcoming in the markets. WallStreetWindow.com. Perhaps you're invested deeply. Perhaps you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. WallStreetWindow.com. Michael Swanson, the brilliant author of The War State, understood these trends professionally for many years, and now he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. WallStreetWindow.com. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now.
There are too many puppets in the mainstream and alternative media. Don't let nobody sell you poisons or lies. Get real honest info. Listen to the Ochelli Effect 5 days a week. And if you want more of the alternative's alternative, visit Ochelli.com and think for yourself.
Get ready for
Chuck Ochelli, the host of Ochelli Effect, and he's been known for many years as a blind GFK researcher specializing in intelligence agency involvement in multiple assassination, propaganda, and other global criminal operations in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Chuck just keeps making sterling point after sterling point here, all right?
The initial stages of surgically cross-sectioning the onion is where we are.
It's something so far beyond the scope of what we've been told. And again, Chuck hit the nail right on the head.
Those individuals who are completely immersed in surrogate reality, in just being concerned with staring down at their iPhones as opposed to looking at the world around them.
The Ochelli Effect. The Ochelli Effect, heard on the internet. A great show.